Here are the best trade targets for Week 11, and we're going to kick it off with Lamar Jackson. Now, Lamar Jackson, you can get him pretty cheap at this point because he's had 6 weeks now of mediocre performances. It's been since week 3, really, since he's had a really solid performance. Other than Tampa Bay, it's been 15 points or less. And so I think you can get him pretty cheap. He's past his bye week, and the remaining schedule is great for Lamar Jackson. I think it's probably the best remaining schedule for quarterbacks. And his playoff schedule, he gets Cleveland, Atlanta, and Pittsburgh, which is just phenomenal. So I think there's a chance that Lamar Jackson wins people playoffs. If you're set up, then you could trade for him. Even if you're not, his rest of season schedule for the regular season, he gets Carolina, Jacksonville, Denver, and Pittsburgh. So pretty solid schedule there as well. He's still giving you a rushing baseline, so he doesn't completely bust less than 10 points or anything. The problem really has been that the touchdowns haven't been there. And he's gone 6 straight weeks without a rushing touchdown. And based on him getting 10-plus rushes a game, I think that the regression is going to come for those rushing touchdowns, and he'll get you some better weeks, especially in these really good matchups that are coming up. So as far as some advice on actual trades that I would do, personally, if I had Justin Fields, I would try to trade Justin Fields for Lamar Jackson plus something, because I think you can get it right now. Justin Fields is on fire and he's worth a lot. I'm not trading him for nothing, so I'm going to try to get Lamar Jackson plus a piece, and he has a much better playoff schedule than Justin Fields. I'm willing to package Dak Prescott and a piece to get Lamar Jackson, Geno Smith, Aaron Rodgers. Any of those guys, I would try to upgrade to Lamar Jackson. What do you think about trading for Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, I agree with all of those scenarios. Lamar's been disappointing thus far, but like you said, it's the lack of touchdowns. And with Mark Andrews being out, Mark Andrews is slated to be back this week. If not this week, then next week at the latest. Once he gets those weapons back, hopefully he starts scoring a little bit more rushing touchdowns, which, as you pointed out, the schedule is nice. So those should start to come. And I would agree with the Fields. If you could sell Fields for Lamar Jackson or Justin Herbert or someone of that caliber and also get a starting asset along with it, whether it be a running back, receiver, tight end, etc., I would do that. I love Justin Fields. I have him in multiple leagues as my quarterback. But carrying him beyond this week does carry a lot of risk. There's upside to it, obviously, as we've seen the past few games. But banking on 150 rushing yards and a touchdown rushing every single week from a quarterback is not sustainable. It's not consistent. So this is probably the most value he'll have maybe in his career. So try to sell him, get something, and then another starting option for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not selling him for nothing. We're not saying that. If you can't get anything good, you can roll with him, and I'm totally cool with that, and I'm doing that in a league or two. It's mostly just he's not going to get 40 points a week, and there's no way to sustain that. And if you can sell somebody off of this amazing ride, then I would capitalize.
Yep, completely agree. All right, so my first buy is going to be David Montgomery. So David Montgomery hasn't looked great over the past month or so. He's actually been out-touched and almost out-snapped by Khalil Herbert. But unfortunately, Khalil Herbert did get injured, and he's already been put on the IR. So that's actually big news for David Montgomery. That means instead of splitting snaps, he will now get the lion's share of the backfield. As we saw last year, whenever David Montgomery got a huge workload against an easy schedule, he literally won people championships. He won myself championships, and he won many of you out there championships off the back of that easy schedule and the workload. Well, guess what? According to Fantasy Pros Strength of Schedule tool, David Montgomery has the third easiest schedule for running backs remaining this year. We talked about how hard the schedule is for potentially Justin Fields, but most of those defenses are bad at stopping the run, which, I mean, could play in Fields' favor. But I would buy David Montgomery. I think you could get him pretty cheap right now. He has not been great. He's had a lot of bad weeks in a row. You could probably get him for just, probably your 4th or 5th wide receiver, maybe your 4th or 5th running back currently you have on your team. Maybe just toss that out there to the owner, see how they're feeling. I expect him to have a lot of useful and meaningful games down the stretches. And if you were to somehow make it to your fantasy championship, he does get Detroit, which is the best matchup you could ask for.
Yeah, like you said, those matchups, if you go look at the playoff schedule, he has a bye week, and then the 3 playoff weeks, he gets in the first 2 weeks, Philadelphia and Buffalo. You could talk to a trade partner who has David Montgomery and sell them that he's going to be bad in the playoffs. But if you actually go look at their adjusted fantasy points allowed for running backs, Philadelphia and Buffalo are a little bit above average allowing points to running backs. It's really the pass that they're stopping. So I think David Montgomery can get it done. With Khalil Herbert getting hurt, I think he's going to be really 15 points a game player. And he'll have his down weeks. But if you're desperate for running back, he's had 3 straight mediocre weeks and you get him pretty cheap.
And surprisingly enough, the Bears have had 225 or more rushing yards in 6 straight games. So They are running the ball a ton.
All right, my next buy is Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is a player we told you to buy right before he blew it up with his big 40-point week, but it's been a struggle for the last 2 weeks. And although it is a little bit concerning, his usage, he's still seeing a ton of snaps, and he's still one of the most talented running backs in the league. Whether this offense can get it together is yet to be seen, and we don't know what the quarterback situation will be. It looks like next week against the Rams, they're going to roll out Andy Dalton. But the health of Jameis Winston is still unknown, and if he were to ever get back in the lineup, I do think he elevates the offense just because I think it's, he's going to be slinging the ball downfield, and there should be a lot more opportunities for Kamara. That being said, even with Andy Dalton, I think he gets back. I think he gets back to at least close to what he was doing in weeks 5 through 7, where he was getting 15 to 20 points a game. It's been a couple of bad weeks, but I think that's why you can buy low on an extremely elite player like Alvin Kamara. And the rest of the season schedule, it's really not horrible for running backs. He does have a bye week, and Tampa Bay left in the regular season. So if you need to win out, I don't know if I'm targeting Kamara, but if you think you might make the playoffs, then I'm targeting him in trades.
To piggyback off of that topic, my next buy is going to be Chris Olave. For a lot of the reasons you just said, their schedule isn't terrible. Their fantasy playoff schedule is actually pretty nice. Personally, I hope they do make the transition to Jameis Winston for Chris Olave. I think him being more likely to throw the ball downfield will help his game a lot more than the dink and dunk of Andy Dalton. Since week 2, Chris Olave still has a 28% target share of the Saints offense, and he has 44% air yards of their entire offense, which are astronomically elite numbers. Now, Jarvis Landry did return to the lineup last week, but that ultimately did not affect Chris Olave's numbers. He still had a 26% target share, which is elite. Unfortunately, he kind of had a stinker for fantasy. He had 7 PPR points, so he didn't kill you, but it wasn't what you were hoping for. He's had back-to-back pretty down weeks, so I think you could buy him pretty cheap right now, and they get to play the Rams. And honestly, if you watched last week's game, the Rams defense isn't looking too hot. Colt McCoy just diced them up for 250 yards and a touchdown and over 100 passer rating. So they're not looking too hot. They are definitely beatable. And I think Chris Olave is one of the best buy lows you can get based on his talent and opportunity. That's really all you can go off from in fantasy is you want to buy talent and you want to buy opportunity. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but those are the 2 things that I'm targeting when doing trades.
I think it totally depends on who in your league has Chris Olave. Some people might value him extremely highly, in which case you probably shouldn't trade for him. But they could be getting tired of Chris Olave because it's been mediocrity for the last 3 or so weeks. And like you said, I would buy talent. And he has a decent schedule, but not amazing. So an average schedule. If you need a flex option, he's somebody that you could target. All right, moving on. My next buy is T. Higgins. T. Higgins is past his bye week, and for the rest of the regular season, he's got a great schedule. His playoff schedule is tough, so I think this might be more for players who are looking to win out and make the playoffs and worry about the playoffs later than people who are already set up. If you look at his rest of season schedule, like I said, past the bye week, he's got Pittsburgh, Tennessee, who's great against the run, not against the pass, Kansas City, who often their games result in shootouts, Cleveland, and then that's the rest of the regular season. So that's a pretty good schedule, and we do have Jamar Chase possibly coming back, but I don't think that hurts T. Higgins in the slightest. He was performing really well with Jamar Chase to begin with, and I don't think Jamar Chase is going to be fully healthy. From what I've heard, this kind of hip injury, he's not going to be his 100%, and he's going to probably need offseason surgery. So with that being said, I think that could result in a boost in T. Higgins' overall volume, which he's kind of lacked in recently. But if you go look at his numbers, I still think there's really nothing to worry about for T. Higgins. He's not killed you in any way. He's been pretty good, and he continues to look like a great player. And I think Jamar Chase's return, if anything, just helps him.
Yeah, I agree. T. Higgins has done better historically for fantasy whenever Jamar Chase does play.
Yep.
So I guess T. Higgins isn't very good against number one quarterbacks. So whenever he gets to face the number two, that's usually when he goes off. My next buy is going to be Mike Evans. I know he hasn't been performing great as of late. I think he has 9 and 10 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks, which isn't really what you're looking for from your draft pick of that high. But I think there's positive regression coming. In his first 2 seasons with Tom Brady at quarterback, Mike Evans had 13 and 14 touchdowns, which are insane. And right now he only has 3, and he hasn't had one since, I believe, week 4. So I think due to his targets and his historical run of being able to score touchdowns at an abnormally high rate compared to the normal receivers, I do think you'll start seeing a few touchdowns come his way. Tampa Bay's offense has been looking better over the past few games. Granted, they haven't played extremely tough competition, and when they started out looking as bad as they have, any improvement is going to be noticeable. But I think they're in a bye this week, so that might even help you get Mike Evans even a little bit cheaper. 2 bad games in a row, now a bye week. Their schedule really isn't that bad. I actually kind of like their schedule rest of the season, and I think it fits him nicely. So coming out of the bye, they get Cleveland, good matchup. Saints, good matchup. San Fran, which isn't a great matchup, but Mike Evans could still catch a touchdown. And then they get Cincinnati, Arizona, and Carolina. So out of the last 7 games, you really only have 1 game that you're kind of iffy about. The rest are perfect matchups. He's still seeing a lot of targets. So in this most recent game, he only had 6. But in the 3 prior to that, he had 11, 11, and 15. That is elite level targets. So I'm going and buying. I actually have a couple trade offers myself for Mike Evans in a few leagues. So hopefully he'll turn it around for us.
Yeah, as far as who to trade to get Mike Evans, I still see him as a low-end wide receiver 1. I think we told you to trade for him a week or 2 ago, and it was the same thing. It's like if you need a low-end wide receiver 1 and you don't really have that guy who can get you 2 touchdowns, then I think he's a person you need to trade for. He provides you upside every week, and he's a touchdown machine. So if you need that upside, I'm willing to move guys, maybe a package trade Christian Kirk, package trade Gabe Davis, package trade DK Metcalf, Alan Lazard, players like that definitely aren't, locked in wide receiver 1s when Mike Evans kind of seems like he should be. So I'm willing to move guys like that for somebody who has the talent of Mike Evans and that connection with Tom Brady. All right, moving on. I'm going to say buy Rachaad White. Now, I know he was just on our waiver show. He may have just been on your waivers, but if you didn't get him, I'm willing to make a move to get him. In leagues that I'm in, in more serious leagues, he probably has been owned for a while now. So odds are you don't have him, right? But I think now is the time to go buy him. It might be too late if you wait until his next game. He is on a bye week this week, but he took over the starting role. He was the starter in his last game over Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette did get banged up a little bit. I think he should be healthy when he comes back, but it seems like they're starting to trust Rachaad White, and even Brady is starting to trust him, even though he's a rookie. He is going into a bye week, so if you need to start this week, then maybe wait a week, or maybe your trade deadline is coming up. Maybe you can't, but if you can afford taking on the bye week, Rachaad White looks like he could easily be one of those players that is a playoff winner. Their playoff schedule is great. They get Cincinnati, Arizona, and Carolina. for running backs, that is actually a really, really solid schedule. And it pairs perfectly with the fact that Rachaad White is looking to be a second half player this year, right? He's a rookie who is an ascending talent, who's passing, the veteran guy in the depth chart. It's looking like around that time of playoffs is probably when he's going to start to catch fire, given that he does. And I'm willing to take the risk, and he looks pretty good on the field. He looks good in his start against Seattle. He had 22 carries for 105 yards. The key thing is he didn't get a touchdown, and that's why you can still buy him relatively cheap if the owner doesn't know what they have.
Yep. Yeah, Fournette got banged up during the game. They expect him to be okay, but anytime you have a veteran guy his age, they start to get nicks here and there. It's never good. And Rachaad White has already been named the starter of Week 12. So you're not even going to have this bye-week scarcity like, oh, who's it going to be? Who's the starter? They've already came out and said Rachaad White is the starter. Yep. So that's good. My last buy is going to be Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper has the craziest roller coaster season I've ever seen. Basically, if you look at every single home game versus every single away game, they are night and day. Every single home game, he has scored over 10 half-point PPR fantasy points. In every single away game, he has scored under 10.5 PPR points. Couldn't tell you. I think it has something to do with what defenses he faces. Typically, when he faces more zone-heavy defenses, he tends to struggle. And whenever he faces blitz-heavy defenses or man defenses, he absolutely dominates. So you might can wait a week before you buy Amari Cooper. He does play at Buffalo this week, and they are expected to have 3 to 6 feet of snow and 30-mile-an-hour winds. So I don't expect anybody to have a good fantasy game this week unless they move it somewhere else, which as of today, which is the 17th, midnight, when we're recording this, they have not moved it. They have not said to move it. They said to proceed as normal. So as of right now, he's not moving it. So you could potentially wait till after this week before trying to trade for him. But his schedule after this week is not bad. So he gets Tampa Bay at home, which you love. And then he gets Houston, which is the return of Deshaun Watson, which should give him a more elite quarterback than Jacoby Brissett. So he gets Houston, at Cincinnati, which both of those are beatable matchups. Even though he is playing on the road, those defenses are beatable. So maybe he can overcome his home road woes, and maybe with Deshaun Watson coming back, that does fix it. And then in the playoffs, he plays Baltimore at home, he plays New Orleans at home, and then he plays at Washington. So none of those are dominant defenses. New Orleans and Washington especially are good matchups. Baltimore has looked better the past few weeks, but I think he's beatable with someone as talented as Amari Cooper. They do tend to play a lot more man coverage. They like Marlon Humphrey trying to go one-on-one with their best receiver. So maybe Amari Cooper can win out there. So I have Amari in a few leagues, and I've pretty much already decided if he plays at home, I'm playing him. If he plays on the road, I'm not playing him. But I do think that will change when Deshaun Watson comes back. I just think he's a vastly more talented quarterback than Jacoby Brissett. And I think, honestly, this receiver core could kind of mirror what Deshaun Watson had at the Texans, where Amari can be this version of DeAndre Hopkins and Donovan Peoples-Jones can be this version of Will Fuller. And maybe they can have that sort of passing attack and that chemistry once it's built. So, and he's coming off of a 4-point game. So I think if you take this bundled with the bad weather Buffalo game, he'll have 2 bad games, and he's already had his bye week. I think you can buy him extremely low after this week.
Yeah, every year there are players that it's hard to predict, but we do our best, that win people championships. They heat up in the last 3 games of the season and win people championships. Just looking at what we know, Amari Cooper definitely has a chance to be that guy with a new quarterback coming in. He's definitely the most talented wide receiver on the roster. If you're going to bet on a guy, it's 100% going to be him in this wide receiver room. So I'm willing to take the risk, and just if he continues what he's doing, he's still a really good start, and you can get him on the cheap, hopefully, after a bad week against a beatable defense. So yeah, I'm willing to trade for Amari Cooper if you want to, take a risk for some big upside in the playoffs, which you need to do to win. All right, is that all our trades?
Yep, that's it.
Alrighty, thank you guys for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for helping us hit 300 subscribers. We're on the road to 500, so we'd super appreciate it if you guys subscribe, leave a like, and comment. We're always answering everybody's questions, people asking for advice. So if you got a question, leave it in the comments. Thank you for tuning in. We have been the Fantasy Bros, and we are out.